Undercover boss walks past the lobby, freezes when he hears two girls say they miss the old owner. Under the gentle morning light of early autumn, John Malertha, founder and owner of the Sunrise restaurant chain, stood quietly before the glass doors of the very first Sunrise branch. It was here, more than 15 years ago, that he had started with nothing, standing behind the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes with his own hands, and personally serving steaming hot plates of food to his customers. Back then, Sunrise wasn't just a restaurant. It was a symbol of hope, a place where every morning didn't just fill the stomach but also warmed the heart. But then time passed, and thick stacks of reports filled with numbers slowly pulled him away from that small kitchen, far from the friendly smiles at the service counter. As Sunrise grew into a large chain, he handed over management to the executive board, trusting they would preserve the spirit he had worked so hard to build. Each month, reports arrived, revenue continued to rise. The charts always pointed upward, and everything seemed fine. Yet a quiet unease gnawed at John's heart. Scattered customer complaints, the weary whispers of a few old employees who still kept in touch, and the vacant stares of the new staff every time he visited during big events. Somehow, something seemed to be cracking behind those dazzling numbers. And so, this morning, he decided to return not as the powerful CEO, but as an ordinary guest. Donning an old jacket and pulling a faded baseball cap low over his eyes, John used a false name and quietly walked into Sunrise dinner, the very place once considered the brightest symbol of the entire chain. He wasn't searching for a luxurious meal. What John longed to find was the soul of Sunrise, the genuine smiles and warmth he once promised himself would forever remain in this place. But deep down, he wondered, did that light still exist under this familiar roof? And perhaps it was this unannounced return that would finally give him the answer. Under the soft yellow glow of the lobby lights, John's footsteps echoed faintly on the worn marble floors. He walked slowly inward, trying to keep the calm demeanor of a stranger. But just as he passed the sofa near the window where customers often sat to chat, the soft but heavy voice of a young woman unexpectedly rang out, cutting through the usual everyday noise. "I miss the old boss. Back then, everything was so much better." John froze. His feet felt rooted to the floor, his breath caught in his chest, and the coffee cup in his hand trembled slightly. That simple sentence, so short, struck him like a blade straight to the heart. Beneath the old coat and the low-drawn cap, his face turned pale with shock, and his heart ached as if it had been jolted awake from a long slumber. He glanced sideways. Two young women, one wearing a faded old staff uniform, likely a longtime employee, and the other a new girl with skeptical eyes and a sigh full of bitterness. Neither of them knew that the quiet man, standing just a few steps away, was the very person they were speaking of. Even John himself didn't understand why that one sentence hit him so hard. Perhaps because it struck directly at the silent fear he had never dared to confront, that in all those years of tirelessly expanding his business and approving cost-effective policies, he had lost the most important thing, the soul and values that Sunrise had once proudly stood for. He stood there for a long time, letting their conversation drift through his mind, stirring up memories he thought had long faded. And in that very moment, John knew this journey wasn't just to check the quality of the food or the revenue. It was to rediscover himself. Beneath his old coat and low-drawn cap, John returned to Sunrise Diner not just once, but many times at different hours of the day. Each time, each angle, revealed new dark corners he had never imagined existed in his own spiritual child. John stood quietly behind the kitchen door, where the air reeked of stale oil and burnt pastries. He saw Garethi branch manager raising his voice at the staff, forcing them to cut even thinner slices of ham for their signature sandwiches. Cheap, low-quality supplies with faded, barely legible labels were being unloaded from trucks without any inspection papers. Stacks of cheap, lumpy pancake flour and bottles of watery syrup filled the shelves. Ingredients John had once vowed would never have a place in Sunrise. During peak hours, the restaurant was packed, but the familiar welcoming smiles were gone. The servers rushed around like exhausted shadows. John sat quietly in a hidden corner, watching as the once signature omelet dishes were served bland, greasy, with oil pooling on the plates. The coffee was so diluted it was barely more than colored water, carrying none of the rich aroma that used to define it. Soft complaints rippled through the tables around him. Is Sunrise really this bad now? Back when the old owner was in charge, things were never like this. John stood silently by the large window, his gaze heavy as he caught a familiar sight. The two young women he had overheard earlier in the lobby, now stood quietly by the counter. They slowly counted their coins, then gently shook their heads, realizing they only had enough for the cheapest meal. Their eyes held a trace of sadness, but as they left the counter, they still managed a soft smile at the staff, as if trying to hold on to a fragile bit of hope for tomorrow. John clenched his fists, his heart tightening as he saw them pause by the steps outside the diner, silently gazing back inside, as if searching for a familiar memory of the past. And without saying a word, they turned and walked away, their small figures disappearing into the fading twilight. Never before had John felt so small and helpless. His eyes stung, his heart weighed down by regret. He who once swore never to let profit overshadow human dignity had allowed it to happen right under his own name. Those cold-hearted policies, those glittering financial reports. In the end, all they brought were disappointed eyes and silent footsteps walking away from a place that had once been a source of pride for so many. And in that very moment, John understood if he didn't start making changes right now, from deep within his own heart, Sunrise would become nothing more than a name on a fading sign, a beautiful dream buried by the passage of time. As the city lights began to glow and the nearby restaurants filled with lively laughter, Sunrise Diner remained drowned in dim yellow lights and suffocating silences. Cold winds slipped through the cracked window panes, carrying with them the faint chime of a wind bell, the last echo of a once vibrant time. John sat there in the corner of the diner, as if he himself had become part of the dusty memories time had left behind. In front of him, the old wall clock ticked patiently, marking every second. The table where he had signed the very first contract to expand the Sunrise chain was now so worn and faded, the familiar wood grain barely recognizable. Just then, his eyes stopped at the cashier counter. Lenath, small waitress he had quietly noticed before, was gently removing her apron, smoothing down her messy hair. She glanced around the diner one last time, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, but her smile remained as gentle as ever. In her hands, she turned over a resignation letter, neatly tucked into an old notebook, its edges already crumpled and worn. John quietly followed her out. Under the dim streetlights, Lena stood motionless in front of the old Sunrise sign. She gently touched the faded lettering, as if caressing the memories she herself couldn't bear to let go of. Then, she looked up at the clear night sky and softly whispered, "I just wish this place could go back to the way it was, just once." That wish drifted into the night air, gentle yet cutting deep into the heart of a man who had once believed that as long as revenues grew and reports looked perfect, everything was complete. John turned away, his shoulders slumping. Never before had he felt such emptiness. All those years he had tirelessly built castles on sand, erected grand walls of beautiful reports, only to find that, beneath his feet, lay the broken fragments of what was once his most dazzling dream. He knew then if he didn't stand up right at that moment, if he didn't tear down those cold, lifeless walls, there would be no place left for Sunrise tomorrow, only an endless stretch of darkness. And in that very instant, a promise formed silently within him, clear, unshakable, and impossible to deny. I will rebuild, starting from this very place, from the humble people who once placed all their faith in Sunrise. The next morning, Sunrise Diner, the scene of an unprecedented confrontation. The main hall was packed. The air was tense, like a taut string ready to snap. Staff whispered anxiously among themselves, their eyes filled with uncertainty, waiting for something that had never happened before in the entire history of Sunrise Diner. At exactly 9 a.m., the glass doors swung open. John entered not as the quiet man in a faded cap from the day before, but as the proud founder of Sunrise Diner. On his elegant dark blue suit, his silver nameplate gleamed under the lights. John Miller, CEO, founder, Sunrise Restaurant Group. Sumbri. The entire space fell silent. Garethi branch manager stood frozen behind the counter, his face pale, his hands gripping the counter's edge until his knuckles turned white. And the two young women, the very ones who stood in the lobby yesterday, eyes filled with hope and regret, were also present, seated in the front row, quietly watching, their hearts flooded with indescribable emotion. John stepped forward. His voice echoed through the room, warm but sharp, each word falling heavy onto the marble floor, shaking the entire space. I once promised that this place would always be a second home, a new beginning to brighter days. But I, too, have been away too long, allowing the darkness of greed and indifference to quietly take hold. He signaled to the technical team. The large screen lit up. Footage played without any commentary. Gary, calmly accepting a thick envelope from a supplier. Boxes of cheap, unregulated, poor-quality supplies being smuggled into storage. A cold audio recording, Has the internal fund been paid yet? If you want the good shifts, you should know what to do. And finally, the image of the two young women counting every last coin to afford the cheapest meal, standing silently by the steps of sunrise, their eyes gazing inside as if longing to find something they had lost. A wave of silence swept through the room, heavy, suffocating. John turned, his eyes sharp as a blade, staring straight at Gary. Gary, do you have anything to say before I sign your termination right here? Gary's lips quivered, sweat pouring down his face, but no words came out. Without hesitation, John pulled out the termination document from his suit pocket, signed it on the spot. His voice rang out, clear and powerful like a morning bell. Saving money is never an excuse to trample on human dignity. From this very moment, you are officially dismissed. He turned to face all the employees. Those of you who have turned a blind eye or enabled these injustices, you have the chance to walk out of that door now, or stay and rebuild this place with integrity. A few lowered their heads and quietly left. Those who remained held each other's hands tighter, their eyes brimming with tears as if, at long last, they had found a reason to keep going. John stepped down into the hall, stopping before the two young women. His eyes softened, contemplative yet filled with concern. Why did you two keep coming back here, even when everything had changed so much? One of them gave a faint, bittersweet smile, still warm despite the sorrow behind it. Because we still hoped that one day this place would feel warm again, like the family breakfasts we all used to dream about. In that moment, John felt a cool breeze sweep through his soul. The ice that had encased his heart seemed to melt away, transforming into deeply stirring heartbeats. He firmly held their hands and solemnly declared, I promise, from today, Sunrise Reborn officially begins, and you those who kept their faith in this place will stand with me to rebuild it all. End up. Right there and then, he handed them both internal scholarship certificates granting them the right to participate in the advanced management training program so they could become the new leaders, the ones to reignite the flame that had once faded. Applause thundered through the hall like a roaring storm, and in that very moment, the first dawn of Sunrise Diner, a new dawn officially began. The atmosphere in the main hall was suffocatingly tense. The air was thick with anticipation and the weight of every gaze. As John signed the termination papers, the sound of his pen gliding across the paper echoed through the silent space, like a bolt of lightning breaking through the long, stormy clouds. He lifted his gaze, his eyes not just resting on Gary, who stood with his head bowed, eyes rimmed red but sweeping across the crowd of employees, as if seeing through every hidden thought, every silent regret. For those of you who still choose personal gain over integrity, I advise you to walk out that door right now. It's wide open, but after today, the road back will no longer exist. A few lowered their heads and quietly left, their heavy footsteps echoing across the hall. The glass door gently closed behind them, leaving the space somehow lighter, yet still weighed down with the gravity of the moment. At that moment, John took a deep breath, his gaze softening as he looked at the two young women, small in stature but standing tall, their eyes clear and determined despite all they had endured. He stepped closer, moving slowly, as if walking back toward the most beautiful memories he had ever shared with Sunrise Diner. Standing before them, his voice lowered, as gentle as a morning breeze. Why do you two keep coming back to this place, even though everything seemed beyond saving? One of the young women tilted her head slightly, her eyes reflecting the resilience of someone who had weathered many storms. She smiled a sad smile, but one that still held hope, because we still believe that one day this place will be warm again, like the family breakfasts we all used to dream about. Oh, those words pierced straight through John's heart. In that fleeting moment, a man who had long forgotten how to dream, how to cherish the simple joys of happiness, suddenly felt his chest tighten, his heart overwhelmed with emotions. He held their hands firmly, his eyes brimming with tears. And this time, when he spoke, it was no longer the command of a CEO, was the heartfelt promise of a man who had once lost himself but had now found his true purpose again. I promise, from today, Sunrise Reborn officially begins, and I want you, those who have kept unwavering faith in this place, to join me in rebuilding everything from the ground up. Abo. Without hesitation, he reached into his jacket and pulled out two special cards, embossed with the words, Scholarship and Leadership Training, Sunrise Reborn Initiative. He placed them into their hands, offering not just a card, but a chance to become the torchbearers for a new generation. Take this. Don't just dream of a new dawn. Help me ignite it with your own hands and brave hearts. In that moment, thunderous applause filled the air. No longer hesitant, no longer forced. Tears streamed down, many face tears of redemption, of hope rediscovered, and of dreams slowly coming back to life. And right then, the true dawn of Sunrise Diner, after so many years lost in the darkness, finally broke through, radiant and warm like never before. That morning, Sunrise Diner wasn't just lit by the golden rays of the sun piercing through the windows, but by the brilliant light shining in every eye, in every smile overflowing with hope. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, that little diner truly came alive again, not just through the aroma of its dishes, but through the warmth of genuine human connection. In the main hall, under the gentle glow of the warm lights, the two young women, now proudly wearing their new uniforms, stood tall, embodying the very spirit of inspiration. On their chests, their name tags gleamed under the soft lighting. Emma Williams, training manager. Grace Miller, operations supervisor. They were no longer the girls who once counted out coins to afford the cheapest meal. Their eyes now sparkled with pride, and their voices rang out strong and clear across the hall. We were once the ones standing outside these doors, quietly wishing for the dawn to return. But today, right here, we're not just witnessing that dawn. We have the chance to become the ones who light that spark for others. Together, let's turn Sunrise into a place where every day feels like a new beginning worth remembering. Thunderous applause erupted, not only from those present but also from loyal customers who had been with Sunrise through the years. They smiled, gently holding their warm cups of coffee, as the sweet aroma of freshly made pancakes filled the air, just as rich and perfect as in the earliest days. Upstairs, by the large window, John Miller stood in silence. His hands were tucked into his pockets, his eyes quietly observing the lively scene below. Laughter and conversation echoed through the space, blending seamlessly with the familiar scent of pancakes fresh off the griddly fragrance he once thought he would never experience again. A soft breeze drifted through, carrying with it the sound of life returning. John closed his eyes, taking in a deep, warm breath of the new day, and when he opened them, his gaze turned toward the rising sun. His voice rang out low, calm, and steady as a lifelong promise to himself and to all those who had waited for this day. This is the dawn I once dreamed of. In the main hall, the soft golden lights mingled with the morning sunlight filtering through the crystal-clear windows, casting a warm glow on the name tags gleaming proudly on the chests of the two young women. The room fell silent, every eye focused on Emma and Grace, the very same girls who once sat quietly by the window, counting coins for a simple breakfast. Now they stood tall and radiant, symbols of hope and renewal. Emma lifted her chin, her eyes sweeping over faces still filled with hesitation, glimmers of doubt lingering in their gazes. Her voice echoed through the hall, every word igniting a spark of hope. We once sat under those very windows, longing to cross this threshold not as guests, but as people who could make a difference. Today, that dream has come true. And you, all of you standing here, know we're the ones who will join us in writing the next chapter of Sunrise's dawn. Grace stepped forward, her smile gentle yet unwavering. Her voice, soft but resolute, followed. Happiness isn't something distant or unattainable. It begins with the simplest of things: a warm greeting, a fragrant cup of coffee, and a grateful glance. From today, we will build this place into a second home, a place where every morning begins with laughter and every evening ends with pride. The room exploded in applause once more. The atmosphere swelled with joy and newfound purpose. An elderly guest quietly wiped away a tear, gently touched the warm coffee cup before him, and whispered, "Sunrise, it's truly back." Up on the rooftop, the early morning breeze gently caressed the slightly open window. John Miller stood in stillness, his gaze never leaving the lively scene unfolding below. The rich aroma of pancakes wafted from the newly renovated kitchen, mingling with the morning breeze, slipping through every corner, carrying with it memories of those early days when he stood by the old cast-iron skillet, flipping pancakes with his own hands. But this time, the fragrance wasn't just the scent of food, it was the very essence of revival. Down below, laughter and cheerful conversations echoed. Bright eyes lit up with fresh joy. The doors stood wide open, welcoming golden beams of sunlight. Sunrise Diner had finally lived up to its name once more, a place where every day began with a perfect dawn. John gently closed his eyes, drawing in a deep breath of that warm, hopeful morning air. For the first time in so many years, his heart felt truly light. His lips moved softly, voicing a promise eternal and unshakable whispered into that sacred moment. This is the dawn I once dreamed of. Asterisk. You can build a grand empire, But if you forget the value of people, it will all be nothing more than a castle made of sand. A sustainable business isn't built upon dazzling numbers, but upon hearts that have been warmed, dreams that have been rekindled, and lives that have found happiness once again because of you. For in the end, success is not measured by profit margins, but by how many people have rediscovered their faith, their hope, and a better life because of you. Asterisk.